Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Conspiracy Corner. We are back, the Four Musketeers, and this time we have got quite the episode for you. One on a topic that is pretty well known. If you know anything about the UFO community or about the secret base community, pseudoscience, any of that, and any conspiracies around that. Today we are going to be talking about the one and only Robert Lazar and his story. And we will be jumping into that. We've got some really good information for you guys. I'm going to cover the story and touch on a couple things that you have probably actually never heard regarding the Bob Lazar story as well, just because of some of our backgrounds and what we have been involved with in our lives. Before we jump into that, though, I wanted to tie up some loose ends. We loved the comments on the last video regarding the attempted assassination of President Trump. And there has been some evidence that's come out since we covered the topic that has totally changed the narrative and changed our opinions even of what we think happened during that. And Trevor, I know that you and I talked about this in depth. What were your thoughts as this evidence came out, like how it changed it?
I mean, the two biggest things that I'm sure hopefully you've got some video of it is the one that's you see the muzzle flash out of the window. This just came out like 2 days ago. Today's August 2nd, 1st. What is it?
1st, yeah.
August 1st came out 2 days ago. And there's a, first story building and you clearly see a muzzle flash shoot out of it. The second was you see the same guy that films that, you see a bullet fly before the volley of bullets that you hear the audio. And it can only be assumed that that's the bullet that killed Crooks, right?
Yeah.
And there were also a bunch of silenced bullet sounds in that same video.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And it happened far before.
Yeah. Did you guys see that the sniper guy who was listening to it for the first time and he goes, "Oh shiz, I know that sound like I know the sound of my kid's voice."
I didn't see that. That's crazy.
I didn't see that. He was
it was insane. And he goes, "What was it?" He goes, That's the sound of a silenced, gunshot.
Silenced rifle. Wow. That's wild. Yeah, some of the testimony from the local law enforcement was pretty crazy about the communication breakdown and how that worked. Yeah, so I've got that video. I want to do it real quick because I think we'd be doing a disservice after our last podcast to not show a little bit of this and tie up a little bit of the loose ends. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, go for it.
Has anyone seen that building where you see the muzzle flash? Is that window broken? Was it for sure broken? You couldn't really. It was open.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, because John Fullen's theory was that it was broken and that he cut his hand picking up the brass.
Oh.
And then he went in the bathroom. And then did you see the video of the guy that's in the building? An intelligence guy signed in. He's on the sign-in log. And he'd think he was just dressed up.
Really? Oh, yes, I did see that. And they were trying to verify if his uniform that said Secret Service and his badge was a legit Secret Service or not. They were wondering why he wasn't wearing a helmet like the rest of the Secret Service, or why the rest of the law enforcement. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, his clothing was totally different, and he just had like a police vest that said Secret Service on it.
So then the other thing that's new that I thought, Trevor, you were going to say, maybe you're going to say it in a moment, but there is video now also of what looks like it's behind Trump and it's looking towards where Crooks was. And it almost looks like you can see Crooks getting shot in that video.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally forgot. I was going to mention that. You see, this is what we were talking about beforehand, where you see him like walking around on the building, which is insane. You could just see him dude, he wasn't even crawling. He's just walking around on the building. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you see his head go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can almost tell because there's a post and then his head is to the side of the post and you see his head like almost even with the post and then go behind, like back behind the post, like he gets shot right there. Yeah. Which would also explain why the rifle is so far away, right? If he's standing and holding the rifle at that point, pretty sure he's standing at that point.
Well, what's really interesting here about that, like if you haven't been following it, is that is sorry, that's showing that Crooks
And then the worst president in the
couldn't
history
have
of
made that
this
shot.
world. And look what happened.
Yeah, you can't.
I don't know who's playing that, but
Trump.
Sorry.
That's okay.
it means Crooks was shot before the bullet that hit Trump.
Yeah.
Crooks was dead before the bullet hit Trump. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Which checks out with John Colin's theory and the audio, right? That the shooter in below hears Crooks get shot and then opens fire more because he's like, oh, the guy who maybe was supposed to shoot someone else hasn't. I'll show that real quick. Let me put this up here. Let's see. I should do it.
There's already been about 10 shots taken.
You guys got audio too?
But there's silence.
Yes.
Go full screen.
And I'll tell you who these shots were taken at in a second. So let's watch this, and then I'll kind of explain the sequence, because this changes everything. The whole narrative is absolute nonsense. You have to throw the whole narrative out. Everything you've heard, nonsense. Let's watch together, and you'll see what I mean.
This is cool. This is where you see the bullet, right? This is where you see the bullet, right?
Yeah.
And to Dave's point, this is before Trump shot. 2 seconds before.
I want to point out too, right? If you're watching, the cops and the lady, they hear the silent shots. They realize something's going on because they start running around. Getting out.
Like, you're so small, girl. I don't know what's going on.
Some people have said, what is that, a UFO? No. That's the kid on the roof about to die. It's not a UFO. The guy shooting is using a shutter speed that's fast enough to capture 2 frames of a round traveling right to this guy's head. What you're about to see is the round that kills the kid on the roof right now.
That's crazy.
You can hear that.
Yeah.
Now here's all the shots, right?
Yep.
So obvious.
And then there, boom, right there was the. He'll show it, but you can see the muzzle flash in the window.
All right, now a moment ago, right there's a silent shot, and we see a shooter in the window.
Right here.
All right, so this kind of changes everything. We see muzzle flash coming from one of these windows right here. And this, we've got images of this, which I'll show you a fixed image in a second. But people have seen this. Other people brought it to my attention, and I said, oh boy, if that's the case, that kind of lines up with one of these silenced gunshots. And that is, there we go. And that changes everything. So we've got some.
So if that's the case, right? And they're shooting from here. There's Crooks. I'm going to share this tab instead. Now we go back to our map, right, that we covered in our last episode. It puts a shooter in the water tower that shoots down. It puts a shooter in the trees over here that shoots the back railing. It puts Crooks up here that maybe, Crooks or Urich, whoever it is, maybe hits the hydraulic line and tries to hit Trump. And then it puts a shooter down here in this window as well, which is wild.
I was paying attention to the water tower in that video, and you definitely have a clear shot of the water tower, but you can't see anybody on it in that video.
That's a good point. I never paid attention to that.
It looks like whoever shot at Crooks, though, would have shot at him from the trees, right?
It does look that way.
Yeah, which is interesting compared to the video that we watched earlier today, where the shot's coming from behind Trump, and it would be coming from somewhere over here.
They're
like one of these counter sniper teams that shot at him.
Yeah, to Jackie's point, they're sitting by that tree right there, right when they're filming, and it's coming right to left
that way.
That's right. That's right.
Enough that it was in front of that camera, so it would have had to come from the trees, not the sniper. That would have been behind them, right?
Yeah,
in theory.
I got it on film.
So who knows at this point? Right, it's still developing, but we do know for sure that. So we got one thing we got wrong last week for sure was the yardage. I think we said like 300 something, but it's been confirmed to be like 100 and something yards from here to there.
I thought it was 149 or something.
Okay, 149 is the number. Yeah, we had said like 300 something, and I think at one point, but it's a lot shorter distance, and and so who knows? There maybe he got taken out by someone from over here, or maybe it was the counter snipers from over here, like in the video that we've watched a few times today. Do you have that video, Trev? If not, it's okay, but I might be able to pull it.
Which one are you talking about?
The one that you sent us just today of like what looks like Crook's head getting kicked back.
I don't have that one pulled up, but I got another one that I'll show if you want to be looking for that one. Yep. So this is another video that you can see a bullet fly by, and it looks like it came straight on from Trump, right? He's facing this way, and you see the bullet fly past him.
Yes.
And people are saying either this place was like UFOs nonstop that were just flying, or at the exact same time when shooting was happening, here's a bullet. So I'll share this one. This again's John Corlian.
Guy's the GOAT putting this together.
Can you see this?
I'm going to add it to the stage right now. Yep.
Okay, here we go.
And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened.
Okay, he'll highlight it.
And then the worst president in the history of our country took over.
All right,
and look what happened. Over. And what you know
about rolling down. I'm glad we got that song in.
Oh yeah. So I'm like, that could have been a bug too, maybe, but it looks like a bullet. I'm like, how bad of a shot were these guys to miss him like that?
If it was
I struggle.
It wouldn't have moved that fast.
That's true, in one straight line.
And
I struggle though to think that we could see a bullet that easy on our.
Yeah, the shutter speed. I wonder, what do we Google? What shutter speed you have to have to? Let me see. What shutter speed to use? The bullet.
I'm gonna look for that other video with the head popping back.
Well, and they were saying though, I'm trying to remember that with the silencer that they used, that those bullets only go 950 miles an hour, and that was enough that like wind could sway it because it's not quite as fast. But I wonder if you could see it. Maybe it was one of the silenced ones.
Yeah, it's like feet per second that they're talking about.
looks like in 2018
it's subsonic.
Yeah.
But
looks like in 2018 there's video I'm seeing of
Thomas Matthew Crooks.
They captured a bullet on just an iPhone video. On the slow motion. So who knows? I don't know. It looks like, from what I'm looking at, it looks like it depends on how close or far away you are from the object for the shutter speed to be able to pick it up. So
yeah, I got this one with his head popping back.
Oh, you got it? Okay, I'll throw it up there. This is a good one. And so for people who are just maybe listening and not watching, so far we've seen out of a window a muzzle flash below where the original shooter was supposed to have, or is supposed to have taken the shot from. That makes it so that there are, in theory, 4 potential shooters with the idea that they would take out the counter snipers prior to trying to take out Trump.
And if you consider that bullet that we're talking about being a bug, that's 5.
Yeah. And John Cullen does say maybe there's 2 shooters in that bottom window because there's the audio of a silenced and a non-silenced rifle.
Would-be assassin Thomas Matthew Crooks. Would-be assassin Thomas Matthew Crooks. Would-be assassin Thomas
It
Matthew.
looks like his head.
There he goes, drops.
Yep. Almost looks like his arm like flails out to the side there.
Good in this.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean,
how about the photo where he's walking around?
Oh yeah, this is crazy.
It'll show it. Let me go back a little further.
Yeah.
Walking. Just walking on the roof while the president's there.
That's so wild. Like that if that doesn't scream like security breakdown, I don't know what does.
Mm-hmm.
You're muted, Jackie, by the way, if you were trying to say something.
Well, it was no breakdown of security.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
All right.
Agree. Anyways, that's that. Yeah. Let's get into Lazar. Yeah, the man. Jackie, you want to run us through what's the story of Bob Lazar? How did this guy get into the limelight?
Okay, so Bob Lazar, there's a lot of controversy about his story, mainly because a lot of what he claimed, people say, is made up when they've tried to go back and verify it. But he claims that all of his stuff was scrubbed, like a birth certificate, where he went to school. And George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell have done a really good job with their latest documentary of really trying to nail each of these points. So I'll give you a quick rundown, though. So Bob Lazar, he's a self-proclaimed physicist. He mentions that he took classes at MIT and Caltech. He didn't graduate, but people have said, oh, he claimed to graduate from there. But he just said he went. He didn't say he graduated. So when he comes on the scene, he had a job at Los Alamos Labs, and he made this car, a Honda with a jet engine in it. And they did, and he was driving around. He said he drove it to work, and they did a newspaper article about him. And it kind of caught the attention of someone else. And when he left Los Alamos Lab, he contacted this guy and said, remember me with the jet car? And this guy got him an interview for this job. And he didn't know what it was going to be. It was with the government. And a lot of people think that it was Area 51, but it wasn't Area 51. It was a subsidiary facility of Area 51 called S4. So he is interviewed for all of this, for this like top secret job. And it's a kind of on call. Like they fly him out there. Maybe he's out there for 2 weeks at a time. And when he gets there, he goes through all this paperwork. And there's a lot of weird stuff in the paperwork. But he says, and this is from him personally speaking, he says he thought that it was like a misinformation type thing. So that sometimes they'll put weird things in there in these like briefings, because if you tell it later, they'll know where the leak came from. Or if it's just like so far-fetched, then you don't know what to believe. So he goes through all this stuff, and they said it was very compartmentalized at this base because they didn't want other people knowing what other teams were doing, so that they could really keep it confined. And he was working with somebody, and they were working on a propulsion system or like off of a UFO. And it took him a while. They didn't tell him that's what it was. They just said, look at this thing. And they called it was a reactor that was using anti-gravity, is what he called it. And they wanted him to reverse engineer it. And it kind of sounded like they had lots of teams come in and try to work on it. And they sometimes would like put these things away for like 10 years and then get them back out and see if technology and science had caught up with them and they could try to make sense of it again. So essentially, though, he said that he worked with this reactor and that it created its own force field, and it was anti-gravity, but it also other thing dang it, I don't remember the other thing, but anyway, so
Impenetrable, right?
yes, that they couldn't touch it, and so they were trying to reverse engineer it and essentially just understand a little bit about it. He said too, like he felt like they definitely could have got a lot farther, but because they compartmentalized everything so much to try to keep it secret, it was really doing them a disservice. But he said that he was actually allowed to go inside the UFO at least 2 times, and in this hangar they had at least 9 UFO, and they were all a different type of UFO, like they all looked different.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what he was doing there, and then because it was so top secret, he said that they had warned him ahead of time that they were going to be like tracking him, like his phone calls and his friends and stuff. And the government found out because they were tracking his phone that his wife was having an affair. And if you have anything going on at your house that isn't on the up and up, they worry like, are you gonna not be an effective asset? And so they like didn't call him in for a while, and he started to get worried, like, do they not think I'm doing a good job? What am I going to do? And
He said they had people following him too, right? He like recognized he was being
yeah,
followed.
Yep.
and it
Yep.
started freaking him out, and then he felt like he didn't know what was going to happen, and so he decided he was going to tell his friends, almost like as a insurance policy, like if something happens to me, this is what's going on. And he said that he had the flight schedule for these tests that they would do on the UFOs. So he took his friends out to this lake, and he said, this is what time they're going to be here. And they saw these like UFOs flying around doing crazy maneuvers. And the friends were like, holy cow. And I think they came again and they got it on camera, but eventually they got caught, and they call him in and they tell him what's going on. He was like, well, I felt like you guys were like being weird. And they said, well, we heard this about your wife. And then they told him, and it was a whole thing. But he got really nervous again after that because of the friends. And he was like, I got to tell somebody as an insurance policy. So I think that's when he went to George Knapp, or
Right.
George Knapp found him.
Yeah,
And
he sought out George Knapp. Yeah.
and he did an interview, but he did it like with an altered voice and face because he didn't want to get in trouble. But so after that, though, it just kind of went crazy. Like they said, anytime people tried to verify stuff, things would go missing and bad things would happen to his friends, anything that would like try to deter him from his story. He has always kept the same story. And there are a few really good points that he has had that are almost irrefutable. One of the big ones was he said back in, I think, 89. I'm not 100% sure on that,
Yeah.
but when he was doing it, this reactor, it worked off of an element 115, and that wasn't an element back then. They hadn't not back then, just they hadn't like verified that it was an actual thing.
Wasn't on the periodic table. Nobody knew what it was, and yeah, he named it, and they found it decade plus later.
Yes, and that was a big thing because he always stuck to that. And then when like Commander, is it Grush or Lieutenant?
David Grush. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he came out and the things that he was describing, he described the same things that Bob Lazar said about how the aircraft took off and what it did, and how it didn't like leave a heat signature, and it didn't have like you didn't see any type of propulsion from it.
Jackie, I got a 2-minute video of him talking about the propulsion. Do you want me to show it real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Do it.
Let
Yeah,
me
the
find
element was unobtainium is what they call it. Yeah. Yeah, super wild stuff. Let's put this up
I,
here.
I thought it was Moscovium.
Is it?
I think
I've
it's
always known it as
Moscovium.
unobtainium.
No, it was unobtainium. Yeah.
I think they like made a name for it. Like that was his
Let's see.
nickname for it.
Okay, so it looks like unobtainium maybe is the nickname. Looks like Moscovium is the synthetic chemical element. You're right, Dave.
Unobtainium
looks like
is what he called it.
I think that was
yeah, it looks like on the periodic table. I'm looking at two different periodic tables. One it has it as Moscovium, like Dave says, and then one is unobtainium.
Yes, you can't question what Dave says.
It's true.
I think Moscovium, they like actually synthesized, like some little amount of it. So that's when it became like totally real. And maybe before that, it was still theoretical or something. I don't know. Because he said that there's one of the things he's saying about 115 is like there's this perfect balance of the geometry in the nucleus where it becomes stable. And he said that it also should theoretically reach some stable version somewhere around element 240 or 247 or something. I can't remember. But so I think it was like theoretical physics. And then, they created this Moscovium recently, but it's not stable.
Correct.
It's extremely radioactive. Its half-life is like a couple 100 milliseconds or something like that. It's very fast. And so, so they haven't actually created exactly what Bob's talking about, but very interesting still.
And I've got a clip. We can look at it as we go into deeper. I have the clip from the film that Jeremy Corbell finds of the unobtainium or Moscovium in the cloud chamber too.
Oh,
so
cool.
I can pull that up. Yeah. And
you want me to play this?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's look at it. We can break everything down.
There's a different physics. That was your job. You were working on that.
The science was something we were trying to figure out, but we knew how the devices would operate. For instance, the propulsion of the craft. Everything that we have, whether it's a propeller plane or a jet or a rocket, it throws something out the back, either high-speed exhaust or a large volume of air. It's an action-reaction force. The action is you throw something out the back and it moves you forward. That's how everything works. This is the first time there's a craft it's a reactionless craft. It's a field propulsion craft. And what it does is it creates a distortion in space and time in front of it, where space actually bends.
It's just technology that doesn't exist yet. I mean, you're talking about that science doesn't even know what gravity is, much less how to produce it or control it. And here is a device that's producing it and controlling it.
Put a bowling ball in the middle of your bed, and then a foot in front of it, take your fist and push down on the mattress. Bowling ball will roll towards it. And that's exactly how the craft works. It creates a distortion right in front of it, and the craft falls forward.
So there's a different physics
well, the science that explains how the technology works. I mean, it's all encompassed as one thing: alien technology and science.
What is the big picture? What is the takeaway of your story after you're gone? You're not a rebel kid with a jet car at Los Alamos today. Today's a different Bob Lazar, right?
Right.
What have we learned? What's the message of your story?
The big thing is the suppression of extremely advanced technology and the suppression of unknown science. That's it.
So that I love that he says that, because that's part of the reason he came forward, right? He says in his original interviews, he's like, I feel like it's a disservice to the American people that we are not, this is being kept from the scientific community when it should be something that's out there and open for everybody to take a look at. Yeah, that's a good clip. And that clip right there is from Jeremy Corbell's documentary that's on Netflix. It's also on YouTube, and it's called, let's see, I don't want to get the name wrong. It's Area 51, Bob Lazar Area 51 and Flying Saucers. Let's see. I have the exact
UFOs or something.
Yeah, UFOs and flying saucers, something like that.
I want to point out, just watching a video like this, all four of us here have seen so many videos of Bob that we are just like used to seeing and listening and talking, hearing this guy talk. If you have never seen Bob Lazar, if you're like showing up here and this is the first time you're hearing about this, you're going to notice how believable the guy is, because he's extremely smart. He is like, and the stuff he's saying is right. I mean, he's not making stuff up. You can like tell. Now, there may be some details in his story at some point where someone can say, "Oh, that one's a little bit funny." But like generally you listen to a person and we all have like this BS detector, and like for me, none of it goes off. Like I do not sense BS from him ever. So that's Bob right there. And man, it's hard not to believe what he says.
Yeah, I agree. Super. I'll go for it.
That Rogan brought up, and he brought him on the show, interviewed him, and he's been fascinated by Lazar. He goes, the thing that's crazy about Lazar that makes him so incredibly credible, is the fact that his story hasn't changed for 29 years. Right? It's like it's never changed. There's never been any flaws in his story, and people have tried to pick it apart left and right, saying that he didn't work there. He produced a W-2, saying, finding people that worked in the same facility of him. And so it's just consistency. He's not hyperbolic. And guess what, guys? He's never tried to make money off of this ever. There's all these other people that have podcasts and they're selling books and they're going to do seminars. Yeah. And Jeremy Corbell had to force his hand to do this documentary.
Yeah. That's true. Some of the details, like the thing Trevor just said, they tried to say like, well, he never worked here, but they found a phone directory with Bob Lazar's name on it at that company. Oh. Right. So there are some things that it's obvious they tried to scrub him out of some of these things. So then if they tried to get rid of him from some of these places, and some people knew him, and he, they talk about in this documentary how they came on site and he's like waving at people and he knows how to get through. They talk about this hand scanner. That was another thing. Oh, yeah. Like along with the Element 115, he's talking about how it reads the bone in your hand and it can, identify you, kind of how we would think in sci-fi. Well, the iris scanner works, right? I mean, we do have iris scanners now, but he's talking about that too, and going into great detail about it. And now they've come out and talked about, oh yeah, we've got technology like this. But if they've scrubbed some things, why? There's something to it, right?
Yeah. One of the things that to me was the most compelling is he had this experience when all this was happening, where he got called in by some of his supervisors and he says, "Hey, we need to talk to you about something. Your wife's having an affair on you." And he's like, "What do you mean my wife's having an affair on you?" He's like, "Well, we've been tapping your phones since you've worked here and we've been listening to all your calls, and your wife's having an affair on you and it's a security risk." And so, and sure enough, happened. And so if he wasn't working at a secret government base, who's he working for that getting legal permission to tap his phones, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to touch on some of that. So I have, some of the parts that Jackie talked about, you guys talking about for the clearances and him working at Site S4. He also states that he works for something that's called EG&G Special Projects. So I have personally seen people's documentation and their work history records who worked for EG&G Special Projects, and I've seen that it is Department of Defense and not Department of Energy. That it's a subsidiary of the Department of Defense, and that it's a special guest star. Welcome on.
Hi.
Here to talk about Bob Lazar. Mm-hmm. So in my line of work, I've dealt with a lot of people who, probably over 1,000 people who have spent time at the Nevada test site, which is just south of Area 51 and at the Tonopah Test Range, and people who worked at Area 51. A lot of people who worked for EG&G Special Projects, and because of their line of work, they were unable to tell me certain things and were unable to move forward with them in certain parts of what I do for work in nuclear healthcare. And so I know for a fact that it's a real thing that EG&G Special Projects exists. I've seen verification of that. And if people are like Area 51, there's nothing there. Also talked to hundreds of people who have worked up there. And the flight that Bob Lazar talks about, the Janet flight, I want to share my screen really quick. Let's see here. This is my Twitter feed, and this is a picture that I took of the Janet flight flying into McCarran. There's no tail numbers. All the windows are blacked out. You can't see. And this is the flight that takes people into Area 51. So, there's a lot of real things that are just normal parts of, his story that people don't realize and might seem like science fiction to a lot of people, but they really are a part of what's happening every day. People are going up to Area 51. As far as S4 is concerned, I've spent hours looking through the mountains around Area 51 on Google Maps and haven't found anything, but there are plenty of roads that go from Papoose Lake that just lead off in the mountains and there's nothing there. You can't see, and you're like, okay, why is there a road out in the middle of nowhere?
I got a question that
shoot
for you guys. Why do we care about Bob Lazar? Like, why does this even matter? Because I could imagine people watching this being like, who cares about this nerd who works at this place? Like, why does this even matter?
I think it matters because, especially what has come out recently with the government all of a sudden being like, oh yeah, there's aliens, and the Commander Fravor and David Rush, like, he backs up what they are bringing to the table from so long ago. And so it all is like adding to the things that we think where we're like, is government lying to us? Are they making things up? It gives a little more credibility to these things, I feel like.
Right. Yeah, it's
100%.
Yeah, it's like his story is being confirmed by what is coming out every day.
It's also it's fascinating too, right? I mean, when he was working there, they told him, which I love the way he phrases it, because it doesn't like set off your BS detector. He said, they told me that this came from Z3, which is the Zeta Reticuli system and the third planet in that system. That's where these came from. And he talks about how one of them he thought was an archaeological dig up. Yep. And, there's all kinds of stuff that we've, all four of us have been in the conspiracy kind of world here a lot. And I've watched Ancient Aliens, where they talk about these archaeological dig ups and findings. This all kind of fits together, right? The answer, of course, is aliens. Exactly.
I had that ready. I knew it was going to come up.
Yeah. But it's fascinating, right? Like, we want to know more about it. So,
and we just want to know, like, the X-Files, the X-Files question, right?
Yeah.
Like,
he's claiming to have really been a part of what most of the world considers science fiction. And he describes it so perfectly. Like Dave says, there's no BS detected, and his story has never changed, right? And he is a physicist, right? And so he worked at Los Alamos Laboratories. You don't just like get a job at Los Alamos Laboratories. I live 20 minutes from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and it's a pain. People talk about it all the time to just get a job up there, like just to be a janitor at these laboratories, to be verified and be able to get the clearances to go to these facilities is really hard to do.
These clearances are very expensive.
Yeah.
I work in aerospace, and every now and then I will apply to a job and they'll say, do you have clearance? I'm like, nope.
Q clearance, right?
And it's kind of a big deal for them, because I have heard it's somewhere in the nature of $50,000 to get you a clearance. So usually you get that through a business. You're working at a place that they need you to work behind the wall. They call it behind the wall. You work behind the wall and they'll get you a clearance. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
And they don't take it. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's fascinating, the details that he talks about, how his wife was having an affair. I mean, like, think of all of the stories you could make up. Like, this is the story that he has. And so they were tapping his phones, and they would do this kind of thing if you were very high in your clearance. They would want to make sure that you weren't about ready to go off the deep end with your mental stability. So they're checking on this stuff, you know.
Yeah, they're trying to prevent exactly what happened in this case of happening.
Yeah.
I actually went to dinner with a buddy on Friday night who works at Idaho National Laboratories, and he has the clearance above Q clearance, and he says every day at work, probably, well, not every day, probably he said 3 of the 5 days I have to go into areas where I can't bring my Apple Watch, I can't bring my phone. They have to pat me down for electronics, nothing. And when I go into these buildings, it's zero. It's just me. And that's it. He's like, because they can't, they just can't risk it for the things that they're working on. And he's working in the nuclear industry. Yeah.
2 or 3 of the reasons why, to me, it was really fascinating. The Lazar story is he tells of a day when he's walking down a corridor and he walks by a room that has a glass window on the door, and he sees a 4.5 foot, 5 foot alien on the table. Right. And he says, I can't tell you if that was an alien or if they put a fake alien there and walked me by it to see it, and he goes, but there was something there. And it's one of the two. And I can't, understand why they would be playing mind games with us, showing us this while we're working on these crafts. Second reason, like Dave said, there were multiple crafts, right? And like Dave said, one of them was they found it in an archaeological dig that, could have been thousands of years old. Other one was downed. We've heard recently through the congressional hearings that the people in the community call those donations, and they're saying that these crafts are so advanced that there's no way possible that they would crash. And so they've received communication that these were donated by these extraterrestrial civilizations to us to help us come on. The other thing is how he describes inside of it. He believes that these things must have been, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, guys, must have been controlled telepathically, because there was no control panel inside of it, right? There wasn't any.
He says there's one screen, there was transparent screen maybe that came down from this archway. He says there's no right angles in the whole thing. That was interesting.
So it was all melted together.
Yeah, he said it was as if you took
seamless.
What's that?
Seamless.
Yeah. He said as if you took something like built a house with the right angles, and but it was made out of wax, and you heated it up for a few seconds, and everything kind of melded together. That's how he describes it. Yeah.
Fused.
Also described that the interior was extremely small, right? Yeah. So for someone who was 4 feet, maybe 5 feet tall, but small.
I wanted to say something about before I forget, and I'm about to, Trevor, that thing you just said about being a donation, that is interesting, because he's talking about element 115, and he said, we have these little triangles of element 115, and I think he said 235 grams is what is used to power up the anti-gravity device. And then he said, I don't know how we got it, but someone told me that we had 500 pounds of this element 115. And he said, we can't even produce, he said, we produced 4 atoms of it recently, 4 atoms. And so he's like, we can't make it on Earth, or at least we haven't figured it out yet, but we have 500 pounds of it somehow. And what you're saying, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like, is this a donation? It was a donation. Here, guys.
Figure it out. Have fun with this.
Yes. Right.
The other thing that Jackie said that, popped a memory into my mind is about how now we're just talking about this, right? And we had family Christmas party, I think is what it was. And, we were just kind of brothers and sisters gathered together and so what's going on? What's new? And I'm like, so the government's admitting that there's aliens. And everyone's like, what? I said, huddle together. Everybody get together. This is the most important thing that we've ever talked about, right? The government is in Congress, and they're telling us, yep, there's UFOs, and they're bringing Air Force pilots, and they're bringing guys, from the deep state in, and they're giving now private protected testimonies, some of the stuff they can't even tell us. And, we've went from just conspiracy theory to just being and there's UFOs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't refute footage taken from F-18 Hornets, right? Of UFOs cruising across the sky.
Footage and FLIR,
Yes.
infrared on two different mediums, right?
Exactly.
So now let's vote between the four of us here real quick, because I'm curious. Are we seeing right now technology that we finally reverse engineered that is from Bob Lazar's group that extrapolated forward? We're actually seeing the reverse engineered crafts that we have built, and the government doesn't want us to think that we are in possession or another country is in possession. So the government is actually pushing a UFO alien narrative, because whatever the media says, they've been given the green
Exactly
light
what
to
to
say it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've got four options, and then we can vote. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Number one, they're extraterrestrial, right? So they're coming from another planet. Okay. Number two is they're coming from this planet, from the ocean. Or number three, they're interdimensional.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Where I'm leaning very, very heavily towards interdimensional. Number four, they're from the future. They're us from the future. And I like number three
All
and
great.
four the best.
I like 3 and 4 the best too. They're all great.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Dave, I think we're seeing both. I think we are seeing some stuff that is developed by Skunk Works or Lockheed or some of these guys that we've actually reverse engineered some of this craft. I think some of the stuff we're seeing is definitely that, but I believe 100% that we're seeing both.
Yeah, I would agree that we're seeing both. One thing that Bob Lazar talks about is he says that, the gravity emitters, gravity can bend space and light, right? He says that when you're standing right below the craft, you could not see it. It's not visible because of the way that it bends the light, the gravity does. So I wonder if, the things that we can see that are caught on FLIR or FLIR that are caught, by the naked eye and regular cameras, are they allowing us to see them? Is it a little bit of a here you go, guys, check it out? I cut you off, Jackie.
Great question.
Oh, I was just going to say that I agree that it's both. And I think we've definitely gained technology from it. But the videos and the stuff where they have these crafts that are going from the sky through the water, not like into the water, but through it with no, it doesn't splash, it doesn't resist, and it goes from these insane amount of heights, instantly down. Yeah. I don't think we have that capability.
I just don't know. I feel like we very well could, because when they were building the stealth fighter, the guys who I've talked to, tons of guys who were just working on the runway, building the runway out of Tonopah, and they were told, if you look up at the wrong time when they're bringing things out or moving parts, they'd shoot you. There's you'll be shot. That's what they said. So I don't know. They said also, that they were making just absurd amounts of money, and so they didn't care. They were bringing money home in suitcases.
I think, Jack,
somebody for that.
Yeah.
Jack, I think if we assume that the Bob Lazar story is real and that they were working on something, you remember there's that one part of the story where he says, my lab partner told me to try to put my hands on the reactor, and you couldn't because it's creating anti-gravity. And just like trying to hold the
magnets,
the like poles of magnets together, they resist. The closer you get, harder, right? They resist harder. And he's talking about that. Now think about that. If you could actually have a craft with this technology and it's surrounding the entire craft, then the force field is on the craft now. The craft becomes part of this item. So as it plunges into the water is going to just get out of the way. It can't stay there. It's in my mind, it's a possibility. I mean, I have no idea, but I like to think, well, if it's real, and we got to finally reverse engineer this stuff. I mean, think about our advancements in computers in just the past 10 years, 15 years. And
think
Bob
about
Lazar,
think about when the SR-72 was declassified.
71.
1971.
No, I was saying the SR-71. Sorry.
SR-71. Thank you.
Yeah.
Blackbird. Yeah.
Yeah, the Blackbird. I mean, we're talking 40 something years ago, right? When they decommissioned that thing. And that's the fastest plane that we know of.
Right. I mean, I remember when the Aurora was just, you know, science fiction, and now it's declassified, and that plane, everyone's like, yeah, it's real, you know. Something that's interesting.
Declassified?
Yeah. I think they declassified it under a different name, but yeah. So one thing that's interesting, do you guys know the significance of the Zeta Reticuli system, Z3?
The binary star.
The binary star. Do you guys know where else that's found in like UFO culture? So Betty and Barney Hill, who was like one of the most famous abductees, they claim that they were told, or they knew, that it came from the Zeta Reticuli system, which is kind of interesting. You know, if you want to put any weight to their abduction story, which I'm sure we'll cover in another episode, but they claim that it came from Zeta Reticuli. And I thought, would you look at that?
Fascinating.
Yeah, I got a video to share. Before I share it, this is a video that I want us to do in the future, but I want us to do a dive into the Book of Enoch. And the reason why I want to do that is because I bought this book from an LDS author named Michael B. Rush. And it's the scariest thing / coolest thing that I've read in 10 years.
Rush does Ezra Siegel, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And if any of you guys want this, I can share. I have the audio. I paid like $60 for it. So he goes over the Book of Enoch, and it talks about UFOs non-stop in the Book of Enoch. And he has a whole entire chapter on UAP disclosures. He's got an entire chapter on the White Woman, which is Chris Bledsoe's episode, if anybody knows anything about Chris Bledsoe. And he talks about the Watchers and the Nephilim, and all of these guys were 100% UFOs from another planet or dimension that came here and conquered. And in the Book of Enoch, and then in Ezra, other parts of Ezra, they're coming back. Coming back.
If it's the cloud seeding theory, right? Come back to what you see the clouds for.
I don't know what the cloud seeding theory is, but let's share. Let me share now this Tucker Carlson video. I know you guys are all aware of this, but many of our viewers may not be. Okay, so
this is giving me some Planet X vibes, Trev.
Yes, I totally considered that when he was talking about it. Okay, you guys seen Tucker talking about UFOs?
Oh yeah, he like is a believer, man. I love it.
And it's scary what he says here.
Learned probably too much about a couple of topics because, by the way, there's some things that I can't prove that I believe to be true, so I don't repeat them. But you know, the UAP stuff, some of it is really distressing to me. What I believe to be true, but I can't prove it. But as I've said before, I think it's spiritual. I think some of these things are dark, anti-human. Probably some aren't, but you know,
do you think because there's potential anti-human properties that there's actually pro-human supernatural?
Well, I think God's real for sure. And as you know, evil flourishes, you also see its obverse. You see good at work. You see God at work. I do in my life all the time in a way that I didn't say 5 years ago. I wasn't thinking like that at all. I'm a very secular person who grew up in a very secular world. Unlike you, I did not grow up in any recognizable church at all. And so I had none of those assumptions. But no, I think it's, you know, in bad times like this one, there are miraculous and heartening moments. And I like see that all the time.
First off, I just love Tucker and Aaron Rodgers both. I just got to say that.
What a combo, huh?
What a combo. But there's another video. I was hoping it was that. I couldn't preview it before I did it, where he talks about it. And he says, it's so disturbing. It's so scary that I refuse to share it with my wife. And I tell her everything.
Wow. In the spirit of him talking about that and the Book of Enoch, and then what you asked, Dave, right, of what do you think it is? And Trevor, you laid out 4 theories. One more theory that I think I've shared with you guys before that I have is in line with the Book of Enoch is the fallen angel theory, right? Or spirits that did not get a body and are somehow trying to, and that would fit the gray alien model like perfectly.
Well, but wouldn't that be interdimensional?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, if you're, yeah, they are dimensions. Yeah, I guess if you want to think of them that way.
It falls in one of those.
Yeah, exactly. I want to show the clip really quick of where he actually has, well, one, so we talked about the hand scanner, right? This is a cool part in the documentary where Jeremy Corbell found pictures of the hand scanner, and he shows it to Bob Lazar. Let's see. He shows it to him real time, and Bob didn't know that he had these pictures, and so it's like the live reaction that we're getting here of that. It's pretty cool. Let's see. 3401.
There's the bright light measures the bones in your finger. They're unique. That sounds like something out of a TV show, but it's exactly the way it is.
Man, I looked for that kind of thing all over the internet, never found anything. And then all of a sudden this article comes out and it says that at the Nellis Range, they were talking about the stealth program, there was indeed this hand scanner that was used in these secret programs, and they just admitted or announced it publicly. And there were some photos, and I just was interested. And so
I never thought I'd see one of these again. But I tried to explain this to people so many times, and they either didn't believe me or say, yeah, I'm sure there is. And there it is. There it is.
It's like a biometric thing.
Pretty cool. I love his reaction. He shows it to him live, and he's like, "Oh, well, would you look at that?" Like,
think about how many people have told him he's a liar on these things.
Yeah.
You know, like I would hate that.
Yeah. So something else that's interesting is Corbell, the filmmaker, is making this documentary with Lazar, right? And in the beginning of the film, he opens it with pictures of Bob Lazar getting raided. Let me back up a step. So now Bob Lazar, he has a website, and I'll link it in the bottom. It's called United Nuclear Bob, and he sells stuff for everything from like science classroom experience to if you wanted to build your own ham radio set in your house and everything in between. There's a clip of him washing what he says is beryllium with his hands. I don't know if that could be, beryllium's like really toxic and could really mess you up. I don't know if that's maybe maybe if it's not like aerospace grade. Dave, maybe it's not as potentially harmful. You're not sure, because beryllium is one of the things that like we treat people for, is exposure to beryllium. But anyways, he has this shop, Jeremy Corbell, in the making of the film. Bob Lazar's shop gets raided by the FBI, by like state police, all this stuff. And then there's a clip later on where Corbell takes him out into the woods, and he says, "We're only going to do the audio for this, and we'll add the video later if we want, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Let's put your phones away over here." He maybe even says something about putting in like a Faraday cage, so they can't like listen to it. And he asks Bob about the element 115 and says, "Did you get any of this out of Los Alamos labs?" And he doesn't want to talk about it, and it kind of goes on, whatever. And then the next day he gets raided again by the FBI, which is super, super interesting and odd. And throughout the documentary, Bob refuses to comment to Corbell on whether or not he got element 115 out of the lab and took it with him. And it's the one thing that he will not comment on, which I think is really interesting. I don't know. Your guys' thoughts on that? You're muted, Dave.
Sorry, I just said absolutely super interesting, because I mean if his story's right, if it's correct, he wants to keep working on that thing,
Exactly.
He made a jet car once. He wants to make something else.
Yeah, what else is he trying to make, right? Trying to remodel UFO.
The Jetsons mobile or something.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really fast Honda this time. Yeah. I also have for those who are curious, and if you're watching this and not just listening, I have actually Bob Lazar's website pulled up here, and this is at United Nuclear Scientific Equipment and Supplies. He has a section on here, Area 51. He sells, I want to buy one of these posters that are hand sketched, where he has drawn out what he describes the craft to have looked like. And you can see here on the screen, actually, is it sharing there? What do you guys got me? Thank you, sir.
Zoom in. Do a
Yeah.
zoom.
I will do that. You can see what he envisioned it to look like, and how it emitted sort of a heart shape, for the gravity, and how these right here are the gravity emitters. He said that it looked like almost like trash cans hanging from pipes below, and that the reactor sat here in the middle, and that there was 3 benches and these arches with potential screen, and this little almost antenna looking thing at the top. And that's what he described it as. And so he has, you can buy posters on his website of it. There's t-shirts, and these sell out really fast. Actually, I'm surprised that they're available right now when he puts them on there. Mugs and everything. There's a lot of great material regarding Bob Lazar and his whole story. And I for one believe it. What do you guys think? Do you guys believe the story? Do you buy it? And what's your opinion on it overall?
I think I do believe him. I don't know if he was a part of a psyop, right? Because the part that I don't love about it is he, besides building a jet that goes on a Honda, like he doesn't have a ton of experience, right? And I feel like there would be thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that would be more experienced than him. And so part of what I wonder, because we do know this from the Michael Doty, right, that the government has planted fake people to go out and plant BS lies about the UFO phenomenon and, give fake intel. And so that's the only part to me that I say, maybe this isn't true. And not that Lazar's not telling the truth, but that he was fed a bunch of BS.
Yeah. That's why you're in the conspiracy corner, man. You got to question all of it, right?
Yep.
So sorry.
Go ahead, Jackie. Go ahead.
Oh, just so when you listen to him on Joe Rogan, I feel the same way, Dave, that you don't have that BS meter, because a lot of times you hear people and they're just yakking and name dropping, and you feel like they're kooky a little bit. He comes off as very sincere, and I felt like they really touched on each aspect of his story, and he was able to say what was what. But then as I was getting ready for this, I went through and I found this other guy who step by step went through and talked about debunking him. And I really want to look into it more now, because he had a lot of claims on there about him being, when he was at Los Alamos, that he was bankrupt for something and he ended up leaving, and that he was saying that they never would have hired him for that type of project, knowing that he had a bankruptcy. And then he was saying he was raided and charged for a prostitution ring.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to mention he gets involved with the brothel. Interesting, though, as he's charged for that crime, the entire time he could have had like a plea bargain or a plea deal, something involved where they would have maybe let him off the hook a little easier if he had said, no, my story is not true and everything. And he stuck to his story through the entire criminal investigation and through the whole trial, which is interesting. But yeah, he did get involved with a brothel after, like a dummy.
Right. So there's things like that. And then one of them that he said, people always say, well, he took his friends and they saw those things. And he said that what it actually was is that there was a particle accelerator up there, and something that it did created these orbs that you would see in the sky, and they were running the particle accelerator. He had the scheduled time for that. And when he took his friends out there, he told them it was UFO because he didn't want to break his non-disclosure. And when they brought him in, he was saying he has to stick to this story, because if he ever told the truth, then he would go to jail. Because when they brought him in, he was like, well, I didn't tell him what it was. I said it was UFOs.
But we've got George Knapp, who went out there on the very first time that Lazar called him up, like Cash said, worrying about an insurance policy. He goes out there twice, tells him this is the date and time that they fly these things. And Knapp, who works for the Las Vegas news station, films them both times. And he says he was just blown away. He's like, I've had people calling in about UFOs for years, never been able to show me anything. We go out there twice and film them both times. So that's not a particle accelerator. That's something in the air.
Yeah. Do we have the video of that? I can probably put up. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
But keep
This is very interesting, Jackie. There is a phenomenon called ball lightning that if you look into that, that's another thing that's fascinating. Bob took, I think, 4 polygraphs, aced them all.
Yep.
Right? What you just said, Trevor, is huge to me. That like he takes George Knapp out. George Knapp is like cut his teeth in the UFO world, and he's like, he takes me out and I see these things. So it's like, well, how does he have knowledge of this? He just somehow, luckily, so that's big to me. And I tend to then believe it. I believe it, but I also wonder about the psyop part of it.
I'm just trying to ask like these devil's advocate questions to like check myself, because I am inclined to believe, like I want to believe, right? And so I'm always like, well, what about this? What about this? When did he take George Knapp out there? Before the government had talked to him? Because wouldn't they have changed their schedule by then?
Well, no, because so they catch him and then they say like, don't. And then in fear for his life, he goes to George Knapp. There's a gap in between the story airing and when he tells George Knapp. And then after he tells George Knapp is when he gets a call from the guy's name is Dennis Mariani is who he claims. And I looked him up, by the way, and Dennis Mariani, I found him in the Veterans Legacy Memorial, a real person in the Marine Corps who has passed away since. That would match the timeline age-wise of having been the brass at the time. But then George Mariani calls him up and says, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" So
you just think the first time that they caught him out there with his friends, knowing he had the schedule, you would change it immediately as a safety precaution.
Potentially. It's a lot of people and scheduling things to move around at a big facility. But
they filmed that before it aired, so they filmed it, they edited it aired on the Las Vegas ABC station, and after that everything unwound for him.
Yeah. Do you have that clip, Trev?
I couldn't find it.
Let me see. I can probably pull it really quick.
Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. One more thing I think was a little bit interesting about the story is some of the things that Bob reports. He says, like, listen, this is my perception, what I think happened. But he said, I have been told, like over my years now that sometimes in these top secret programs, they'll feed you certain information and it's almost like a tracker on the information. So it's like, okay, we got Dave coming in. We're going to tell Dave that these aliens come from Zeta Reticuli and that blah, blah, blah. And so if all of a sudden they find out that a rumor's spreading about aliens coming from...
We can hear your audio, Trev.
Sorry.
Keep going, Dave.
I was saying, all of a sudden, if a rumor starts to spread that these came from Zeta Reticuli, well, they're going to be like, well, we know that Bob was the one who was leaking, right? It's like, so he's like saying certain things. He's like, I don't know, but this is what they told me. And I think that that's really different from a lot of the other UFO people you've seen who've come forth and said, oh, I did this. And they come up with some funny details, right? Now, one thing that I called BS on when I was listening to Bob, and it just stuck in my head, is they asked him, this reporter said, how do you turn on the reactor? And he said, well, there's many ways that you can turn it on. And then which to me, that right there is that's a lie. That's someone who's telling a lie would say that as a response, right? But then he went on to say one way that you could turn it on.
Yeah,
so then I was like, well,
load activated, right?
Yeah. So it threw me off, but then it's like, maybe it was just a nervous response, but yeah, anyway, I tend to believe it. I think I believe the Bob Lazar story.
Yeah, I have that clip really quick. I'll show of, yeah, if you guys can move that around, thanks. Okay, and I'll make it full screen. So this is some of the original footage from that they aired. So back here, is him, the voice edited and everything, and then it came full fledged. And here's him.
The voice isn't edited. Listen to it. It's clear Bob Lazar.
Oh, right. Is it back here? Okay.
Yeah.
He was referring to this.
Oops, sorry. I better take it off 2x speed. Let me go back just a little bit.
Already in, he was referring to this. 2 months before the Dennis interview, Lazar began taking a few friends out to the desert on Wednesday nights. They focused their attention not on Groom Lake, but in the direction of Papoose Lake, which is where Lazar said he worked, a facility he called S4. And sure enough, on each of 3 outings, the groups witnessed a glowing.
So that's what, Jackie, what you're saying could possibly be because of the particle accelerator.
Disk rise above Papoose, even though officially they're.
So that's the clip of it right there. So believe what you want of that. Yeah. So I have a story. I don't know if I ever told you guys this. I have a story about Bob Lazar, though, from one of the people that I interviewed. So one of the guys that I talked to in Las Vegas was a bus driver, and he was Q clearanced, so he could drive to what they called the forward areas at the Nevada test site, and then to other areas through what they called through the gate, which means you could go to Area 51, right, to drop people off. So if you didn't take the Janet flight, then you would either take the bus from in town to the test site, or you would drive yourself to the test site. And then there was additional buses or trucks that would take you to the forward areas to where you needed to go, where they were doing the nuclear testing up on the flats up there or in the mountains. And then over through the gate to Area 51, where they had a burn lake up to Papoose Lake and up to Tonopah, where they were doing weapons testing, like, missiles and ordnance testing. So one day he's in my office, and I've become decent friends with this guy just through, different conversations, and we're helping him out with his stuff, what I do for work. And his wife's filling out some paperwork. And it was just been after some more of the naval footage broke on the news. And I said, have you seen this stuff out at the, on the news right now about the UFO footage? And he's like, oh yeah, man, I've seen that. It's pretty cool stuff. And I was like, kind of reminds me of, Bob Lazar. And he's talking to me, and he puts his hand down and he says, Bob? And I said, yeah. He said, Bob Lazar, you talk about him, that crazy story. He goes, I know Bob. He says, everything that man's saying is true. And I said, really? And I'm inside, I'm like, I'm like freaking out, I'm losing full. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. He goes, everything that man's saying is true. He says, I used to drive the bus up there all the time. I'd see them flying those things around and testing them out on the flats, but I'm not really supposed to talk about that. And that was it. Then he just kept on going on with what he was saying with his conversation with me. And that was it. And like, ever since then, I've been like, oh, I buy it hook, line, and sinker. And that's what he told me. And this is old. He's like 80 years old. And I would have guys all the time that, that were real upset with the government, or they're just, starting to lose it, getting a little senile, that would occasionally slip things. I had a guy tell me they lost plutonium missiles one time, like in the atmosphere, and that came down over Canada, and they got readings of plutonium in the snow up in the mountains in Canada. And they're like, oh, that's where they resurfaced, or re-entered the atmosphere and burnt up. I had a guy tell me that they had some iron doors blow off of a test in the side of a mountain and like lodge themselves a mile across in a valley, and they never recovered them. They're just there in what now is BLM land, and so all these crazy stories. And this guy told me this, and he said, Bob, everything that guy's saying is true. He says, I've seen them test those things, fly them around out there. I'm not really supposed to talk about that. So that's my story of Bob Lazar. So I buy it. I like it. Maybe it has been changed over time. Maybe there's some drops of psyop, like Trevor said, regarding it. But to me, I like to think it's real. Cool. Anyone else have anything for this that we want to add? The Bob Lazar story. Awesome. Thanks everybody for watching and tuning in. We appreciate the likes and the subscribes. They go a long way to help the channel go a long way as well. And be sure to share this with your friends. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, leave it in the comments, and we would love to talk about it in the Conspiracy Corner. See you next time.